So hello and welcome to iTDi session. It's actually our first session on presenting grammar for the new year 2024. This has followed on from the free lesson that we offered, which comes from the TESOL Certificate course that we also run. And we decided to try and make it free so that teachers who can't usually access these opportunities wherever they are in the world can also do so. But also to give people some insights if they were interested in taking a longer course with us as well. This is the first activity, and so there's kind of questions about what do you think about different aspects of teaching grammar and how important is it for you? And you know, there are no right or wrong answers because it very much depends upon your context.
For me, it's always the struggle of focusing on form, giving the most important information and only that, and then relating back to real life. That's like the balance I always try to find.
Actually, I agree with Deborah. It's kind of looking for balance between making it not too boring, like connecting it to personalizing grammar, so like making it via examples maybe, not sticking to rules, because students get bored very quickly when we start this PPP. It's requires lots of creativity from my side because I need to think of examples relevant to students and making them engaged into the topic, into the lesson.
Great answers, hey Phil?
Yes, definitely. And you know, I think it's always good to put ourselves in our students' shoes and go back to our own experiences to share that with our students as well. They would then know that we can relate to what they're going through. So we can look at some of the techniques. As you say, you might expect a picture on the board, Thomas. So you might put something like this up. And you know, she got the students engaged at the beginning and asking questions, getting students to answer and building that situation first. So that was one of the things that I think we all like about it.
And what a confidence booster that was, I thought, every step of the way, because she's asking very simple questions from the picture. And I would picture students nodding their heads. And when I see them nodding, I know that they're engaged, they're with me, and I'm taking them just step by step up to the big prize at the end.
Yes. And I also like how, you know, she started probably with vocabulary and grammar structures they're familiar with. Where is she now? What is she doing? And for me, I tend to use timelines like this. Any show of hands for people who use timelines? Yeah. So often a go-to. And you can see I've got the now, and then she's waiting for the bus, and I'm going to show that happening. I tend to use a dotted line like this or a curvy line, just to show that something is when I'm using a progressive or continuous verb. And then key question at the end, is she still waiting for the bus? And I think one of the most overlooked things, whether teaching vocabulary or teaching grammar, is asking good concept checking questions to ensure that students understand the meaning. And even amongst experienced teachers who, you know, have taken courses with us, that's probably the one thing that people tend to forget at the end. So I'd like to highlight that today. Then I kind of go back and I'll think about, okay, so here's my 30 minutes. And when does she start waiting for the bus? And so how long has she been waiting for the bus? And then again, you have that same concept check question, but you can show now, okay, this is how long she's been waiting. She might still be waiting for some amount of time and so forth. Anybody do this? Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No,
I was just going to ask, anyone do this in a similar way or a little bit differently?
I'm not as curvy as you.
But, I like the way you did it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it helps to distinguish the different elements, I think. So it's true, she might still be waiting in the future, but the relevant thing is the 30 minutes before that.
Right. Yes. What could I do if I want to flip it a little bit, do you think? and get my students more involved. If my students are a bit more confident, or maybe I did this last week and I'm doing a review this week.
I'll usually get them with higher levels and more confident students. I'll get them to do the timelines, especially if they know how, I've been teaching them for a while and they kind of know how I would do it. I'll try and get them to do it, get them to compare, and then I'll go through it with them a lot like this, and then they'll see how right or horribly wrong they were. It depends.
Yeah, I love it, definitely. And they can get working together. And in my larger classes, they can do it in groups and then see what other groups did. And then sometimes they just go around and they're like, oh yeah, we made a mistake. And I say steal from correct answers from each other. It's fine.
Yeah, I do that as well. Steal, be thieves. It's okay here. It's a safe space.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's helpful to throw in the since and for distinction here in the timeline, because in many languages people confuse the two. And so that is very helpful and very easy with visuals to kind of show how they use different.
Yes, definitely. And you can show that, the full 30 minutes versus the arrows down on a particular time as well. Thank you, Elka, for highlighting that as well, which I haven't actually done here. I'd like to share this one. Down in the bottom corner, there's a picture of Scott. He's been with us on a number of different courses and part of the IT community for so many years, I can't remember.
Yeah, not the Scott, but a Scott.
Yeah, this is another Scott in Osaka. He on an early TESOL course, he shared this with other members of his cohort, which Rhett in the bottom right loved so much, he then kind of readapted also into his context. And then Scott was like, no, actually, I got these from John Fanslow, Rethink Vocabulary and Teaching. But using kind of different info, kind of graphic and ideas to, get students to produce sentences as well, fill in the blanks or use these as prompts. Does any of you use something like this, or if not, then would you be interested in using something like this with your students? How do you think it would be received?
No, but that is super cool.
So we're looking at kind of form, meaning, and use when we take a look at vocabulary, but also earlier, one of you mentioned, talking about, whether you're looking at form in your classroom, and we still need to look at these three things when teaching grammar. If we go back to those techniques we looked at earlier, or those kind of aspects or components that we might include, we might think about, which ones are we doing, and are we covering all our bases of form, meaning, and use? So Steve and I looked at these earlier, and I'll just share kind of our analysis. There might be different ways of looking at it, but for example, if you look at the first one, a situation to provide context for the grammar, generally we're looking at showing the usage and the meaning, but there's not really the focus on the form. But when we go to number 2 and demonstrate the structure, then yes, the main focus is on the form as well as the meaning.
Phil, are you proposing that the most effective has all 3 check marks?
Yeah, so I would say that there's none that really has all 3 check marks. So therefore, it's kind of what combination of these do we use, and how much time do we have, or do we use some of them in one lesson and then we use others in a different lesson, like a follow-up lesson or review lesson, or it depends also. For example, some grammar points will lend themselves to number 5, having a table with the different forms, or getting students to complete a table, but not all grammar points do that.
Yeah. Are you advocating that not all 3, but that a mix of these is more effective than only one column?
Yes. So I would say for you then, start thinking about what do you do already, and kind of what are your students getting from the combination you use?
Yeah.
And as you say, Steve, we often tend to have a common way of doing things. And as we get more experience, sometimes we need more of these techniques, sometimes we need less of them, and we make those adjustments depending upon how our students are responding to
Yeah.
what we're teaching. Often when I create stuff like this for my own students, you know, I'm actually going to probably leave 2 blank ones, because I will have students who get through the first 4 very quickly, and they will finish first. So it gives them something to do whilst maybe the others are still finishing off the first ones.
20.
So yes, this question, who's doing the most work and therefore the most learning, often is good for us to go back. Quite often, you know, textbooks do a great job of, you know, highlighting things, like I've highlighted the red parts here, and organizing vocabulary into kind of semantic groups, etc. But I always feel that by doing that, we're kind of taking away some of the higher order learning that is beneficial to our students. So although I've highlighted this here, I actually don't highlight it for my students, but I will ask them to look for the patterns or highlight stuff. So I just wanted to point that out as well. One of the teachers in the community, she flipped this. She just posted this actually just a few days ago. She said I could share it, and it just happened to be a nice example of her getting to get her students as well to look at these. These were kind of advanced plurals, right? Cactus, cacti, fungus, fungi, and then some others below, alumnus, alumni, and get her students to come up with the rules for these. I thought that's quite a nice way of doing things too. So those 10 key considerations, 8 of them you already saw in the lesson, the self-study lesson. We've worked with those today, numbers 1 to 8, plus number 9, where we focus on form, meaning and use with concept checking questions. And these are the kind of the 10 key considerations we might look at or revisit when we're teaching our own grammar. I'd like to give you an opportunity to then share amongst yourselves, you know, which do you tend to prefer? Or do you have a particular way of doing things? You know, for example, I always start with situation and then I give a demonstration, but maybe I don't use example sentences as much. Maybe I can do that more. What kind of changes do you see making in your own classrooms? Or are you just happy already with what you've got?
I think a lot of these I will try to use. It really depends on how old the students are, their level. Is it online? Is it in class? It really depends. It's kind of a pick and mix as to who I'm teaching, when I'm teaching them. Also, like some classes are in the morning and they're all kind of like fresh faced. Sometimes it's adults after work, and you know, they'll be a bit put off if it's just too grammar centered, or let's say focusing on form or something like that. But I think a bit more structure could be a bit more beneficial for myself and like the order in which to do these.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you've been teaching a long time, it's very easy to have kind of found a flow. But if you then look back at what you're doing in each of your classes over a period of time, you may notice certain patterns emerging from that as well.
Yeah, some good, some not so good also is the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Thomas.
Okay, Deborah, let it be you, yes. So
no, please go first.
Actually, I think that I'm teaching adults mostly, yes. So and analyzing my approach, reflecting on it, I think that I tend to look for examples from their sentences, like taking their context. Even if I plan to have some grammar topic, I am during the warm-up activity at the beginning of the lesson when they're sharing some news or with each other, I try to pick up sentences that I can use on the next stage of the lesson for my grammar kind of focus. Yeah, so, and I think that I need to focus more on these concept checking questions. If I don't like prepare them beforehand, it's challenging for me to formulate the right one, the best one during the lesson. Yes, so that's why I just maybe skip the stage and give examples, ask for examples from students. Yes, so and yeah, concept checking questions. It's the point to be thought about for me right now.
Actually, just on that, you know, concept checking questions, it's very hard sometimes to come up with good ones on the spot, because to make them simple enough as well to get the point across and the right combination. Sometimes I do, I send out delayed homework with my classes. They all know, actually, I have a class and they always get their homework the day after. And that actually gives me time to review my lesson and see what type of homework would be most beneficial to them. And so you could put, like, I can then put things like the concept checks into the homework and in summaries.
I struggled as well with coming up with good ones on the spot, but it was kind of like immersing myself in watching another teacher do it, kind of put a whole bunch of ideas in my brain, and then it made it much easier. It's like watching somebody cook a dish, and just standing there and watching them doing, oh, okay, yeah, now I got it, you know, and that really helped me.
My experience, I've worked in schools where I was forced to use PPP for a long time. And then with my private practice, I completely decided I was going to do whatever I wanted. And that might be a little delusional, but I stepped away from this structured lesson, which, and honestly, saying this, it's nice to me because it reminds me that there is a structure that can be followed. It can be really helpful. Just because I don't use it all the time doesn't mean that it's quite the opposite. It is really effective, and so it reminds me that I can resort to that. But I honestly like to create a need and then teach the need. I like at the point of need. I like working with emerging language, so I'm constantly typing down what students are saying, and then I am most of the time basing that often than teaching grammar, you know, at the point of their need. And I feel like the hard part is really how can I use it? You know, like I might memorize the rule, but then how can I use it? And I feel like that's my role, is to help you, not to teach you as like I know everything, listen to me, but like let's just put it together in the real world.
So these are the main three areas we've covered, from our beliefs to looking at different approaches. When we look at different approaches, thinking about what our preferences are, but also is there some benefit in different approaches that we haven't tried yet, and how we incorporate those into our teaching. We've looked at kind of 10 key areas that we can consider, and they help us to analyze what we do as teachers and reconsider the components that we include in our classes, not necessarily all of them at the same time for everyone, but obviously selectively according to our context. Just going back, you can see that basically you've kind of experienced having the self-study lesson at the top, where you see Scott's face. Today, kind of like a simulated tutorial. And then I really would encourage you to then implement things in your classroom, but also, you know, think about sharing them or getting another teacher to observe them, or record yourself if you can, depending upon your context. Watch your own recording and maybe do that with a study buddy or accountability partner, and finding also places to share that as well. So for example, in the iTDi, on courses, we do that in forums. For those of you who have taken courses with us, you know that the forums get a life of their own. Having that community, that support is often essential to our professional development. It's like kind of sometimes like exercise and diet. It's so much easier to continue something if we've got other people to do it with, compared to just doing it by ourselves. If this was part of a course, like either like a 30-hour course that we do or 140-hour, we would then actually set up a teaching practice for teachers, where you'd pick something and then you'd put it into practice, come back in the following tutorial, basically do peer teaching, and then get a chance to get feedback, and then that would be something that you then might be implementing in your class. So it's kind of that nice staging between learning new things, practicing them, putting them into practice. These are some things I'd like you to maybe go away and think about, would be what you want to put into your teaching practice, what are you going to commit to? Secondly, all of this is about, you know, closing that gap between what we want to do in our classes, what we think we do, and what we actually do. And this is often the value of having that peer or self-observation, because we can start to see those gaps. And often, you know, it doesn't matter how long we've been teaching, the gap between what we think we do in our classes and what we actually do in our classrooms, or what we plan to do, and what we actually do can be very different at times.